chairman of the Wisconsin delegation arise?
Thank you for the microphone, Mr. Chairman. It's very difficult to get it turned on. It's now 1:10 in the morning, and I think every delegate in this hall wants to go home and go to bed and come back so that they can... Therefore, we wish to move adjournment until 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
What did he say? The motion to adjourn is not a recognizable motion.
I challenge the ruling of the chair.
Now listen.
I challenge the ruling of the chair.
Turn it on! Get it on!
The chair recognizes the delegate from California.
It's Phil. No, it's Phil he's with. Carl.
The convention will be in order. The convention will be in order.
First it was the Bonnie, the catches the Bonnie, the next time the outdoors. I think they're pretty tired.
I'm tired, but John Driscoll told me to go on. Will the convention be in order? The convention will be in order. Convention will be in order. The chair recognizes the mayor of Chicago.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Convention will be in order.
Mr. Chairman, this convention is held for the delegates of the great Democratic Party, not for anyone in any balcony trying to take over this meeting, and if they don't quit their holler, we'll clear the balcony. And they're here, Mr. Chairman, they're here as guests of the Democratic Party, and let them conduct themselves accordingly or clear the galleries and proceed with the business before us. Let them act like ladies and gentlemen and hear anyone out.
Will the convention be in order?
Adjourn.
will the convention be, will the sergeant at arms enforce order in the convention? Oh. Now that, will the convention be in order? Will the convention be in order? Because may the chairman make a brief statement? May I make a brief statement? It is not in order to make a general motion to adjourn, because that would kill the convention. The chair would gladly recognize the distinguished mayor of the city of Chicago to adjourn to a time certain, such as 12 o'clock tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn to 12 o'clock tomorrow.
The question is on the motion. So many as in favor will vote aye.
Aye!
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, the House stands adjourned until 12 o'clock noon tomorrow.
The Honorable Gail McGee, the distinguished senator from Wyoming. Senator McGee.
Mr. Chairman, our role here today is to take the two proposed planks and assess them in terms of their capabilities of winning for us the chance to make a real peace. And I would like to suggest to the members of these delegations that we dare not leave out the history of which we're a part now in reaching that assessment. What it says is that as we focus intently on Vietnam, we cannot irresponsibly ignore its impact on the surrounding areas. That's the way the question began in the first place. The assaults around and across the 17th parallel occurred at the very moment that North Vietnamese troops were occupying large sections of Laos. They occurred while sections of Cambodia were also occupied, and northeastern Thailand and Burma. What this says to us is that it cannot be divorced from the whole of Southeast Asia. And thus the issue confronting us becomes a measuring of the impact of the two proposed planks, not alone on Vietnam, but of all of the East in our united quest for peace in that area. We stand here today in this convention nearly a quarter of a century after we committed to assist and to shield the newly independent governments of Southeast Asia in achieving a measure of dignity through independence. a whole generation of new leaders, a whole generation of new governments, a whole generation of new economic and social programs in all of those small lands have been undertaken in the expectation that the United States would assist in trying to achieve some semblance of orderly change in the area. That's what's at stake now. It behooves us to ask ourselves, what happens if we withdraw so rapidly without any measure of the consequences elsewhere? What happens to Laos when we leave? They're gone. What happens to Cambodia? What happens to the neighboring nations? Little Singapore has reminded us that if we recede before their own infrastructure of security can be realized, that their days are numbered. The Tunku of Malaysia, when he was here, reminded us of the same grim note. If Southeast Asia comes unraveled, who then can vouch for the capabilities of preventing the unhinging of Korea and all that that portends? You see, so much hangs on this tiny little place on the globe called Korea. It is all cut from the same fabric of the entire world. The world has become a matter of massive concern to us because of our role of leadership into which the history of our time has cast us. And that's why it has been so difficult to untangle the many threads running through the complications and problems in a place like Vietnam. But that ought to warn us all against absolute judgment, against knowing for sure that the other guy is wrong and only I am right. It ought to humble us as we seek the wisest way. In my judgment, the majority platform plank keeps open the most of those options for us. And I would add, my friends, that as we seek some reasonable, restrained measure of survival in this nuclear age, that surely we understand that Republicans and Democrats aren't the only ones involved. Indeed, it is the world. And the problems are bigger than either party. They're much larger than a convention floor. And it seems to me it's imperative that this great convention supply the next President of the United States with those same free options to lead toward peace, and not hobble him with restraints and particulars. That this convention likewise not complicate the tasks of negotiators. The world is too small, the times too frightening for the playing of political games with not our own fate alone, but with the direction of hope in the globe. And this is why I submit the basic difference between the two platform planks is the options that are ours after November. The times will change before the ink on this platform is dry. We have to point a direction. We dare not freeze a situation. And the majority platform plank does that. The world is round. The United States is a part of it. There's no longer a place to hide. We have to make our peace with it and around it, and our role is that of rising to the responsibilities of our leadership in the world.
Mr. Chairman, I yield 4 minutes to the distinguished Democratic nominee from the state of New York and the next U.S. Senator from that state, the Honorable Paul O'Dwyer.
fellow delegates, you're cutting into my time. I've got 4 minutes. Fellow delegates, you are called upon here not so much to dwell upon a platform, a majority report, or a minority report, but in truth to rescue this convention. In his invocation, Rabbi Cohen said, quoting the prophet, "The whole head is sick and the whole heart is faint." Let us hope that the rabbi was not a prophet of the deliberations of this convention by the result that comes from your vote here today. You are called upon not so much to listen to argument about the minority report or the majority report, because that's mere rhetoric. You are called upon to pass the majority report to actually approve of 4 more years of the same, and that's precisely what it is. It is altogether too late here for us to begin to discuss the merits of the war in Vietnam. That question has been presented to 7 million Democrats across this nation. That question was presented in the states where there are primaries, and the people have found an indictment of that war. They have returned an indictment that the war is unconscionably cruel, that it is highly immoral, that it is disastrously wasteful, and that it is unbelievably savage. They have concluded that $30 billion that is wasted in that war could well be spent to relieve the burdens and the problems in the inner city and poverty in our country areas. That it could be spent to dispose of the inequities that exist and last within us, that we have now a chance here to reprieve ourselves. We have a chance at least to eliminate the sickness and the faintness that has come over us. We have failed once already. We have put the brand of racism upon this convention by failing to heed the minority reports already of those who would seek equality. Let us once and for all, let us prove to the young people of America that the difference between us and the Republicans is not rhetoric, as they say it is. Let us not give them an argument from this point on for leaving us as they will unless we pass a meaningful plank with respect to Vietnam. Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to present the distinguished governor of the great state of Missouri, the Honorable Warren Hines. Governor Hines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I know full well that the delegates will be exposed in this debate to a great amount of oratory, a great amount of emotionalism, and I come before you with neither. I know full well that many of the delegates here today have already made up their mind as to how they will vote on this particular issue. I'd like to address myself, if I may, to the people back home who are listening by radio or watching on their television sets, and point out to them that we have two planks, a majority and a minority, of which we must take one or the other. I support the majority plank because I think that it is the better of the two. I would not want anyone to feel that because of my support that I do not have or did not have my doubts as to the wisdom of the decisions that got us involved in the particular war that we are now in. But I would be the first to admit that the wisdom that I have with the use of hindsight was not available to President Eisenhower or President Kennedy or President Johnson. I would not want you to feel that with my support that I believe that all of the tactics and the strategy which has been used in this war in Vietnam has been in the best interest of the servicemen in that war. But I want to point out to you, if I may, I would like to speak this afternoon in behalf of the serviceman in Vietnam, because I believe that many of the decisions that are being made here in this convention hall by we politicians have been dictated by the prospects of victory or defeat. Victory or defeat in November. And I say to you that the serviceman has been handicapped enough in the past. And for God's sakes, if you adopt the minority report, you are going to jeopardize the lives of the servicemen in Vietnam. So please, I beg of you, don't play God with their lives. Adopt the majority report.
Mr. Chairman, it's a rare honor to introduce a man who, if President Kennedy had any right arm, it was this man, the honorable delegate from the state of Massachusetts, Kenneth O'Donnell.
Thank you, Congressman, Mr. Chairman, and fellow delegates. I come to you to speak on behalf of the Minority Report. I represent no candidate. We, those of us who had the privilege of being associated with President Kennedy in his days in the White House, and associated again with Senator Robert Kennedy in his quest for the impossible dream, joined together because we felt so strongly that someone must pick up the standard, that someone must face up to the grave crisis that faces the United States of America, both here at home and abroad. I served in all the deliberations of the Platform Committee and on the staff that drafted this report, and I too joined the chairman and the members for the very constructive approach to the problems and the crises here in the United States. But I would like to present to this convention a platform that the chairman suggested, which really is the most forward-looking document that perhaps this Democratic Party or the United States has ever seen. It speaks to the great problems of the United States, the problems of the city, the problems of civil rights, the problem that the Kerner report addressed itself to, the problems of the lack of education of many of our citizens, the problem of our older citizens, of labor, of old age, of all of the things that affect the United States of America. And it speaks to them in terms of a crisis that must be met. We in the Platform Committee wrote a document that looks to the future and not to the past, until a plank was introduced that, in my judgment, does not face the crises of the future. The platform we wrote calls upon you, as delegates, Congress, to face up to the problems of America. It calls upon us to spend billions and billions of dollars to carry out the recommendations and the suggestions that we incorporated in our platform and that you will adopt at some stage today. Billions of dollars of new money to meet the crisis in the cities, to help our mayors, to help the states meet their own problems at home. And ladies and gentlemen, it is the height of irresponsibility for us to adopt a platform to recommend to the Congress programs that in fact we are not capable of funding in the Congress of the United States. In the last Congress of the United States, due to the inability of us to meet our obligations abroad, our balance of payments, and even the unworthy programs that are now before us that are just beginning to meet the grave problems of over 100 years of neglect, we were forced to watch a Congress of the United States, in order to appear to be responsible or even be responsible, cut the budget $6 billion in the last Congress, and they cut it out of all of the programs that are affecting the lives of every single American, out of our programs in health, in education, and the problems that face our children. Ladies and gentlemen, we are recommending at this moment a budget to the Congress of the United States which will cause a great increase in expenditures to meet these problems. And we will not have the money unless we are able in some fashion to disengage ourselves from the expenditures not only of our best treasure, our young men, but the fact we are spending $30 billion a year in a foreign adventure in South Vietnam. It must end. We have said unconditional bombing, halt, because this is a prerequisite that Hanoi has suggested, or they will not talk. Let the majority report not delude us. It does not change one iota from what we have suggested in the past. We suggest we look to the future. Let us recognize there is a civil war in Vietnam between the Saigon government and many other indigenous forces, the Viet Cong, but many others. Let us recognize that fact. The minority report says they must negotiate with each other about their own country and let Hanoi go home and let the United States bring her 600,000 troops home. That's what we seek. And lastly, let me just complete. Let us not delude the American people that we can adopt this platform in its domestic sense, meet our responsibilities for vast expenditures of money to meet the problems of the United States of America, and continue a foreign adventure, a foreign engagement that is costing us $30 billion a year. This is the height of irresponsibility, and let us not leave this convention as the Republicans left Miami, promising all things to all people. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, before introducing the next speaker, let me make an announcement of great importance. It appears now that on the basis of our, as best we can calculate, the vote on this most important measure will occur at about 2:45 or thereabouts. We're informed that a number of delegations from a number of states are having caucuses here and elsewhere. And the chair is suggesting to those delegates that they be advised that they be in the chamber no later than the time that I've just now announced. And now it's my privilege to introduce a distinguished lady from the great state of Minnesota, Mrs. Jerry Joseph.
Mr. Chairman, fellow delegates, fellow Americans, the majority report calls for the election of a government in South Vietnam, an election in which all parties and factions may participate. The minority report demands that the Saigon government now, before an election and before a ceasefire, negotiate with the Communist National Liberation Front to create a government which is made up of all elements in South Vietnam. My friends, what is our only purpose in Vietnam? It is to provide conditions under which the people of South Vietnam may know peace and begin the long process of recovery and development. I believe that the election of a truly representative government is the only way to lasting peace. And I believe that an imposed coalition government is no more than a stepping stone to a disruptive, long-term communist takeover. The minority plank does not mention free elections. We all want an end to that war in Southeast Asia. Not just some of us, but all of us. We deplore the political tactics sometimes used by the Saigon government. We are all frustrated by the very hard role of being an ally and not the supreme commander. But if we want a lasting answer in Vietnam, if we want a government which truly has the support of the people, then the people themselves must choose their leaders. Freedom of choice, self-determination, the right of people to choose. These are the themes of America's message to the world. So it has been, and so it is now. If we abandon a nation for which we have fought so hard and so long, if we abandon it at the moment when realizations are in sight, then what hope can there be for people in Eastern Europe? What hope for people throughout the world for whom self-determination is still no more than an elusive dream?
Mr. Chairman, I am honored to bring to the platform a decorated combat veteran, the former congressman from Cincinnati, the Democratic nominee and the next United States Senator from Ohio, a man who played a very key part in the development of this comprehensive and thoughtful minority report, the Honorable Jack Gilligan.
Mr. Chairman, fellow delegates, fellow Democrats, we are gathered here in this great convention in free assembly as free men to consider certain proposals which we as a party must take to the people this fall. We must now consider not only what this long and tragic conflict in Vietnam has done to that tortured nation, but what it has done to America, to our plans, to our ideals, to our image of ourselves as a people. We have not only devastated Vietnam, but we have distorted the vision of America. We went to Vietnam to help, but now we remain to destroy. We did not intend it so, but as Tacitus once said, we have created a desert and called it peace. We wanted the people of the UN, of Vietnam, to live in freedom, Now our concern is that they be able to live at all. We went there to preserve freedom. Now there is no freedom in Vietnam, North or South. We wanted to save the children of Vietnam from tyranny. Now we want to save them from death. And what of ourselves? And what of our people? And what of our sons? We have lost 25,000 young American lives in Vietnam, lives and talents which this nation desperately needs for the solution of our problems at home. We have spent $100 billion, money and resources which again are needed for the repair of the ravages in our own societies. Scripture says, what father, if asked by his son for bread, would give him a stone? Our young men have asked for a chance to build and develop, and we have sent them overseas to destroy and to kill. Our young black people have asked to be trained for a job, and we have trained them for warfare. We are told we cannot afford to rebuild our cities because the necessary funds are diverted to the destruction of the villages of Vietnam. I say to you that we here in this convention today are facing the ultimate decision which the people of this country are going to have to make in the weeks and the months ahead. If the leadership to make this terrible and fateful decision is to come at all, it must come from the Democratic Party. It is obviously not going to come from our adversaries. That decision will not be made by a few leaders or a few appointed officials. It will be made, if it is made at all, by we, the people of the Democratic Party and of the United States, met here in Chicago today.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege and pleasure to present to you a representative from that great new state in our magnificent United States, Representative Spock Matsunaga of Hawaii.
Mr. Chairman, fellow Americans, despite our seeming disagreement, there is one thing about which I am sure we can all agree, and that is that we are all Democrats by our own free choice. I think we can also agree that we are Democrats because we know we can always do better than any other political party by any other name. But we must admit that in the process of doing better, we also fight each other better than any other political party. It has been said that in a way we Democrats are like alley cats. We fight like the Dickens, but end up with darling little kittens. We are now debating what is undoubtedly the toughest issue of this convention. Our political enemies, as well as a few within our own ranks, are saying that this is the issue which will split the Democratic Party and lead to its defeat in November. Knowing this, we must resolve our differences on this issue
with a plank that is at least acceptable to most of us. Unanimity, of course, is not possible. Basically, as Democrats, we can all agree that ours is a peace party. We must not deceive ourselves into thinking that we are being asked now to choose between a peace plank and a war plank. Both the majority and minority planks offer a peace plank. Neither should we be misled or confused by the convenient labels of hawks and doves. We are all Democrats concerned with attaining the earliest possible peace in Vietnam. In a real sense, the difference lies in the tactics to be applied in attaining peace in Vietnam. The goal is the same. I rise in support of the majority plank because it offers the realistic approach and, under all the circumstances, the right way. It is a plank which most Americans can and will support. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm honored to introduce one of the early voices in the House in opposition to this war, one of the true leaders of Black America, the young, able, effective, and distinguished congressman from the state of Michigan, the Honorable John Conyers.
Mr. Chairman and my fellow delegates, I come to this podium with one question. If the majority report is really what it means to say to you here today, why has it not been effectuated in the last 4 years? Why should we wait to this particular point to begin to determine what should have been recognized since I arrived in the Congress some almost 4 years ago? And because of my conviction that we have misplaced sorely our emphasis in Vietnam, I must tell you that I have voted against supplemental appropriations every time they've come up every year and will continue to do so as long as my district sends me to the Congress. And I would like to remind you that it was in this spirit that the late, beloved Dr. Martin Luther King began to acquaint me with the deeper, more philosophical meanings of nonviolence, because he asked me how I could be nonviolent as a person and not help lead the greatest nation in the world to the nonviolent philosophy. I couldn't answer him, and that's why I stand here urging Black and white Americans to join us in making this great issue have an honest and deep conviction to all of us everywhere. I can't continue to tell those in the ghettos and slums across America that we can't produce the domestic programs, an America of opportunity for all, when every time I present a program, my own party leaders tell me the war in Vietnam prevents it. We here can change that, and I urge that you act dispositively today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, the former governor of Nevada, the former head of the Governor's Conference, the past state chairman and national committeeman-elect, a Humphrey Pledge delegate, the Honorable Grant Sawyer of Nevada.
Mr. Chairman, fellow delegates, Mr. Burton stated that I was a Humphrey delegate, and I think in order to put my remarks in proper context, I should tell you that I am a Johnson-Humphrey man, a strong supporter of Hubert Humphrey, I hope and believe he will be nominated here today. I want very much to see him elected in November. Now, in addition to his other credentials, I'm personally convinced that if elected president, Hubert Humphrey will be more able to quickly and honorably terminate our involvement in Vietnam than any other candidate. I have become increasingly concerned, frustrated, and doubtful about our role in Vietnam. I am convinced that the deep unrest in our country is principally rooted in this conflict. I suppose that I could be labeled a Humphrey Dove. Some other Humphrey supporters on the platform committee with me found themselves in the same position. We came to the conclusion that the Democratic nominee, whoever he may be, must have room to move quickly and effectively and honorably to end our involvement in this tragic conflict. Now, without arguing the merits of the past policy, a platform which tends to bind us and our candidates to a continuation of it not only unnecessarily ties the hand of our candidates, but in my view will in all probability result in the defeat of Democrats everywhere in November. We must offer real and substantial hope of ending this conflict if we expect to win. Even though we have some quarrels with the minority plank, a substantial number of Humphrey people take the view that the adoption of it will indicate a desire to rethink and explore new alternatives and will strengthen our candidates immeasurably. In supporting the minority report, we act in what we consider to be the best interest of all Democratic candidates everywhere. Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to present my colleague in the House of Representatives, who has served with distinction on the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Clement Zablocki of the great state of Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have been advised that a rumor has been initiated that Vice President Humphrey does not support the majority plank on Vietnam. I am authorized by Vice President Humphrey to inform the delegates that he fully supports the Vietnam plank. And I am pleased and proud to join the Vice President in supporting the majority plank on Vietnam because I think it is the right road to peace. The plank is reasonable, moderate, and a balanced statement. My fellow delegates, I support the majority plank not only with the conviction that it is right, but in the conviction that we are speaking the sentiments of the vast majority of the American people. That majority of Americans cannot be labeled as hawks, and they cannot be labeled as doves. They are passionately interested in peace. And the majority resolution before you is neither a plank, nor a dove, nor a hawk resolution. It is a statement of a party committed to peace. We have been polled almost to death these last few months, and I do not wish to base my case on polls alone. But you will recall that several recent polls have made it unmistakably clear that vast majorities of Americans have supported these basic propositions. The people of America seek to end the war in Vietnam as soon as possible. The majority plank declares that, and I quote, "Our most urgent task in Southeast Asia is to end the war in Vietnam." The American people oppose a halt in the bombing that is totally unilateral. The majority plank calls for the end to the bombing, but provides what Americans have indicated by almost 3-to-1 they would insist upon. The plank calls for the protection of for our troops in the field and asks us to take into account response from the other side. The people of America oppose by better than 2-to-1 the imposition of a coalition government on South Vietnam. The majority resolution declares that, and I quote, "The post-war government of South Vietnam should be determined by fair and safeguarded elections, open to all major political factions and parties prepared to accept peaceful political processes." I therefore submit that the people of America support the majority plank. I urge the adoption of the majority plank.
Mr. Chairman, one of the most distinguished members of the United States Senate, a famous son of a famous father, a leader of our party, even at this early age in his life, the distinguished senator from the state of Maryland, Joe Tidings.
My fellow Americans, I rise to support the minority position on the Vietnam plank. The minority report differs from the majority in spirit as well as content. The minority report reflects the recognition by this convention that conditions at home and abroad are changing continually and rapidly. It recognizes that the conditions which may have led to the decisions involving us in the internal affairs of that small, unfortunate nation in 1956, in 1961, in 1965, are not necessarily the same today as they were then. It recognizes that the next President of the United States must not be bound by past policies and past mistakes, regardless of the administration which made them. It recognizes, the minority plank recognizes, that the next President of the United States must be able to make all decisions relating to Vietnam free of the past. A distinguished spokesman for the majority stated that the practical differences between the two planks are negligible. My fellow delegates, the spirit and the appearances of the majority report is to rubber stamp the present war policy of the United States in relationship to Vietnam. And I submit that we must not compromise with the policies of the past, which have led to that dearly bought deadlock which now exists in South Vietnam. My fellow delegates, for the sake of our nation and all mankind, we must not temporize with one of the most tragic consequences and conspicuous foreign policy disasters in the history of this nation. With this platform, we should renew the spirit of this party, the belief that peace and freedom and human progress will prevail not so much at the end of a gun, but through the seeds of hope and the tools of industry and education. No nation in the long history of this world approaches our own in its zeal for liberty, its willingness to share its blessings, and to sacrifice in a just cause. Despite our mistakes, our demerits, we are still, as Jefferson said, the last best hope of the world. And my fellow Democrats, we must remain true to that promise in this platform. I thank you.
A gifted and compassionate governor from the great state of Vermont, a man who played a key role through the entire processing of the platform, a man who is going to continue to rise in the political horizons of our party in this land, the Honorable Philip Hoff, Governor of Vermont.
Mr. Chairman, and my fellow Americans, I believe, and I am firmly convinced, that this country stands at the threshold of a new era, a threshold dedicated and with the ability to conquer the traditional enemies of mankind. We now know that we have in our arsenal the weapons to destroy poverty, ignorance, disease, and hunger. The only thing that separates us from this is the will of the American people. And I must say most tragically that this senseless, stupid war of miscalculation has perverted that will. And so today, I invite you, as Americans, dedicated to the best propositions of this country, to join those of us in the minority plank who are willing to forward this battle and to destroy the only thing that stands between us and that purpose, and that is the war in Vietnam, which has destroyed the will not only of the American people, but the will of each of us individually, and has turned us back upon ourselves. I plead with each and every one of you, let us not return to that post-Korea period of our lives, but rather, may we together forward ourselves. Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the great privilege of presenting one of the distinguished lady members of the United States House of Representatives and a longtime member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, the Honorable Edna Kelly of the great state of New York. Ms. Kelly.
Mr. Chairman, fellow Democrats, fellow Americans, what is it we want out of our Vietnam plank? We want a definition of principles and goals, not a tactical manifesto. We want to instruct the next President of the United States to make a just and honorable peace, not to limit his options and prejudice his position at the negotiating table. We want a declaration to the world of America's peaceful intent and the Democratic Party's peaceful purpose, not recrimination about the past. The majority plank calls for an honorable and lasting peace in Vietnam, our most urgent task in Southeast Asia. It recognizes our willingness to take some risks in the quest for peace.